Hi there goes, Mr. Gilmore here, just coming at you with another video. This one is going to be about coordinates still, and today we're going to be talking about what we call the midpoint, okay? And we refer to this as the technical term for this isn't just the midpoint, but the midpoint of a line segment, okay? And the idea here is we have 2 points on a plane, and we want to find what is the middle between those 2 points, okay? So the idea here is, imagine, I'm at A and my best friend is at B and we want to meet in the middle. Well, we'd want to find the midpoint to figure out what that connecting, like what the middle between the two of us would be. So midpoint is the middle point. Simple as. And for some of these, you can almost just look at and go, wait a second, I can just visibly see what the midpoint would be. You can see, okay, between A here at, sorry, 3, 2, and B here at 5, 4, you can kind of just see that the midpoint here, and I'm just going to call the midpoint M, is at 4, 3, can't you? Like, you can see that that's midway between A and B. But obviously in maths, we don't like just being able to visually see something. We also have to be able to mathematically look at it and go, okay, we've got a mathsy way of doing this. We've got a way of doing this that doesn't even require us to look at a graph. And it's actually fairly simple what you do between the two. The midpoint, I'm going to call it M and then a little a and a b, just to show it's the midpoint of this line segment. We remember the term line segment from when we did geometry. Line segment, it's a line that has 2 endpoints. And what we do is we go, okay, it's going to be half the sum of the x values. So half the sum of these two. Okay? So you can see that 4 is the same as 5 plus 3 divided by 2. And similarly, half the sum, the addition of the two y values. So you can see, wait a second, 3 is half of 4 plus 2. Okay? So that's going to be true for every single midpoint. In fact, we define the midpoint, and I'm going to give you some kind of very mathsy equation for this. If the equation makes sense to you and you can look at it and go, yeah, I can understand that, fantastic. If you're looking at it going, this only confuses me more, don't worry about it. It is in your book. It's the midpoint between any 2 points. So the midpoint of the line segment between 2 points is the x value of the first point plus the x value of the second point divided by 2. And that's our x value. And then the y value is going to be the y value of the first point plus the y value of the second point divided by 2. And what's happening here, I'll actually change that there. What's happening here is I'm just putting a little 1, tiny, tiny, tiny little 1 at the bottom right of the x value to say, this is the x value for the first, this is our first x value. And then a tiny 2 at the bottom right of the second x to say, this is the x value for the second point. So this is kind of just indexing our x's and y's, okay? So let's see if we can actually use that midpoint value to figure out another one of these, okay? So let's find the midpoint between C and D. So it's the midpoint technically of the line segment, so the line between C and D, the kind of middle point along that line. So first we're going to need the coordinates of C, which is going to be, we're going to figure that out, 6 and 2. And then we're going to find the coordinates of D, which is going to be, you can see that it's 8 and 7, okay? So, what's going to be x1? What's going to be x2? Well, x1 will be C's first value, so 6. X2 is going to be D's first x, so D's x value, so 8, all divided by 2, comma. And then what's going to be y1 here? Well, that's going to be a first C value, sorry, a y value for C, so 2. And what's going to be our y2 value? Well, it's going to be our y value for D. Now, one of the things you might remember is that when we were doing addition and subtraction, we called addition commutative, okay? So the reality here is it doesn't matter if you take the D values to be the y1 and x1 and y1, and the C values to be, you know, x2 and y2. Just so long as x1 is with y1 and x2 is with y2, okay? So 6 plus 8, that's going to be 14 over 2, comma, 2 plus 7, that's going to be 9 over 2, and oh, we're going to get a decimal value here, aren't we? We're going to get 7 as our x value and 4.5 as our y value. Now, as we continue on, we might start finding more and more kind of decimal values for our midpoints, and that's one of the reasons we're using this formula, okay? It's so that we can allow ourselves to kind of manipulate these values a little bit and kind of go, okay, we're going to have decimal answers, okay? So the midpoint should be around here. That's our midpoint there. And yeah, that looks roughly right. That looks roughly, you know, it's going down by 2.5, across by 1, up by 2.5, across by 1. Yeah, okay, that's good. I'm going to leave E and F for now. If you want to just take a second, jot this down for yourself, and then even just figure out E and F for yourself and find what the midpoint value for that is. And then I'll continue on with our next section. Okay, you can pause it if you want. Our next section is we're just going to look at exactly the same thing, but this time we're using all 4 quadrants. So you'll probably notice, like I did when I was introducing the grid, I started with just using the positive, the first quadrant, and then I use all 4 quadrants. Again, we're going to do the same. So let's start by trying to find, again, the midpoint of A, B, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to label the values for A and B. I'm also just going to label them as x1 and x2 for a second, okay? So A, just quickly looking at this, is going to be at 1, 4, and we're going to label that x1, y1. And then B is going to be at 4, 1, okay? And we're going to label that x2, y2, okay? Now, we'll zoom back out again and we'll have a look at finding this midpoint here, okay? So, let's have a look. X1 plus x2, so 1 is our x1, plus x2, 4 is our x2 over 2, and then y1, so that's 4, plus y2, it's 1 over 2, and from that we should get 2.5. in both cases, okay? Now, what do we do when we're dealing with negative numbers here, okay? So let's try to find the midpoint between A and C here, okay? And I'm saying let's find the midpoint between A and C just so that we're dealing with both. Actually, you know what? Never mind that. Let's find the midpoint between C and D. Let's actually be way more ambitious than that. Let's find the midpoint between C and D. I'm going to label C and D here, okay? I'm going to label D minus 2. Sorry, that's me doing that wrong. We need to do a x value first. Minus 4, minus 2. I'm going to label C minus 2, comma 2. And I'm going to make D x1 and y1 and C x2 and y2. Again, it doesn't really matter so long as x2 and y2 are the coordinates of one point, x1 and y1 are the coordinates of the other point, okay? So, let's have a quick look at how we'd solve this out, okay? So we're going, okay, midpoint of the line segment CD, okay? That's going to be x1, which is minus 4, negative 4, plus x2, which is negative 2. So we're adding a negative number, okay? Now, if any of you don't fully remember how to add negative numbers, I'd really recommend going back to our integer chapter and reviewing over that. You will need these skills to be able to do the maths for today. So y1 is minus 2, y2 is 2, all over 2, okay? So minus 4 plus minus 2, that's going to be minus 4 take away 2. So adding a negative number is the same as taking it away over 2. And minus 2 plus 2 over 2. Minus 4, minus 2. So we're starting at minus 4, and then we're moving back 2 spaces. So that's minus 6 over 2, comma. And then minus 2 plus 2. So we're starting at minus 2. We're moving forward 2 spaces. So we get to 0 over 2. And just getting rid of those points. Minus 3. Oh my god, look! This midpoint, it lies on the x-axis, and we know that because the y value is 0, okay? So there's our little midpoint CD, okay? So, we know now how to find the coordinates on a plane, we know how to find the midpoint, and generally, sometimes it can help if you're doing it on a grid, you know, write in where that midpoint is for yourself with a pencil and just go, okay, does that actually make sense as the midpoint? Is that halfway between the 2 points? It can be a great way of figuring out. However, we're not just doing this so that we can be able to do it with midpoints. We're also doing it so that we're not just doing this so that we can just do it with grids. We're doing this so that we can also do it without any grid at all. So if you want to pause this and take it down, you're free to. But I'm going to move on to our final slide, okay? So we're into coordinates, the midpoint, and here we have only been given the coordinates themselves. So I'm going to start by trying to find the midpoint of AB. Okay, so x1 is going to be 2, x2 is going to be 3, y1 is going to be minus 1, y2 is going to be 4. Okay, so x1, 2 plus x2, 3 over 2. And then y values are going to be minus 1. So y1 is minus 1. Y2 is 4 over 2. So if we add those together, 2 plus 3 is 5 over 2. Minus 1 plus 4 is 3 over 2. Again, you will need to be able to know how to add and subtract negative numbers, okay? And just giving that in decimal form is going to be 2.5 and 1.5. And again, this should be each of these values. The x value should be halfway between these two values. So it makes sense that 2.5 is halfway between 2 and 3. And 1.5 is halfway between -1 and 4. If we thought of that on a number line, it should be like halfway between them. Let's try out another midpoint. Let's try out the midpoint between B and C. So in this situation, the coordinates of B are going to be x1. The coordinates of C are going to, the coordinates of B are going to be x1 and y1. The coordinates of C are going to be x2 and y2. Okay, so x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. x1 is going to be 3 here, so 3 here. x2 is going to be adding -2 here over 2. y1 is going to be 4 here. y2 is going to be 3 here over 2. Okay. Now, 3 plus -2 is the same as 3 take away 2. So that's going to be 1 over 2. And then 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 over 2. So finally, we get 0.5 and 3.5. Okay. So that is how we find the midpoint of a line segment between 2 points. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you girls a little bit of work to do for yourselves. Can you girls go to pages 303 and 304? And can you girls give a try at questions 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, I'll throw that up into the assignment tab. As always, girls, I hope you have a great time doing this. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Bye-bye.